Persona 5 has had a massive impact on the gaming world over the past decade, but hidden beneath the game we got is something that could have been completely different. Different character fates, female protagonists, and a game that didn't even take place in Japan. Today, we're exploring the unused content of Persona 5. Early on in development, Hashino and the team came up with the concept of what Persona 5 would be, and they decided they wanted to try and make it a backpacking game. In the original concept, the main character would be a backpacker who would travel by flying around to different places on a journey of self-discovery. This was changed after the 2011 earthquake in Japan, as Hashino wanted to put his focus back on Japan rather than the outside world. I personally think this would have been an incredible experience, especially since Persona locations can get a bit samey after 50 or 60 hours, but I can understand the reasons why they never went through with this. Changing the setting was only the beginning though, as the characters went through many different looks. As with any video game, concept art was created for the characters before the designs were finalised. I find this extremely interesting, as the designs went through many different types. Joker went through many different designs, notably one that included a scarf wrapped around his neck, which I personally think is unbelievably cool. There are around 6 concept arts made for him, with the 6th being very close to how Joker ends up looking currently. Ryuji's original concept features him looking more in a punk sort of way. He also looks quite a bit older than I think he does in the final game, and of course his hair is still black, it's not dyed. Arn has always looked pretty similar throughout concept art, but I think her one looks cool nonetheless. Morgana looks very different, being drawn much more feminine at the start, with the ability to change into other things other than just a van. Yusuke was originally a female, and was also given the name Yugo before it was changed to Yusuke. Makoto was drawn early on, and was originally going to use a sword and a gun, and Saya also appears very different from how we see her in game. Futaba was originally going to have more of a black-haired, depressed girl design, however they said they didn't want to go through with this because it was a bit too stereotypical, so we changed it to the look we got today. She also has a concept art outfit, which I personally think is probably better than the outfit we actually got in the game. Haru was most likely the last of the female characters to be designed, and there was also a high chance she was originally made to be a supporting character before being changed into a main character, which could explain the lack of story arc that she kind of has in the main game. Akechi's art was a lot more basic, with his Phantom Thief outfit kind of looking like a cowboy. However, the second concept art looks a lot more like the Akechi we get in game, and I think that's such a big upgrade from the original concept. Last up for the Phantom Thieves, we actually have Hifumi, as she was originally planned to be part of the team. However, when deciding on confidants, they decided Hifumi would work better there, and the fact that adding her into the main story would have made the game even longer than it already is. She was planned to be a strategist in the group, since Makoto was the brains, but they ended up just scrapping her and giving her parts to Makoto more. Which one of these outfits is your favourite? Please make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you're enjoying so far. The outfits the Phantom Thieves would wear went through many different changes, with one of them being their school uniforms. However, this was changed as it would make them look very recognisable and caught easily, and I'm not sure why this is even considered. The original rooftop hangout spot is in a different spot, which I personally think looks way cooler. Concept art for Joker's house in his hometown was made, but it's unknown why, as it's never really referenced in-game. There's concept art for early Velvet Room concepts, showing it looks a lot more fancy, with an aquarium in the back. There's also finalised Velvet Room concepts, which show Joker in a different outfit to the prisoner one he wears in the final game. There's a lot of other concepts that I'll show on screen now without naming them one by one, but you can see the cafe and other unnamed characters that were designed, but never made into anything more. Outfits weren't the only thing Atlus tried though, as the main character was nearly a different gender. Persona 5 nearly went down the route of a female protagonist, as seen here. Concept was made for her, her red hair mixing with the game's themes. I personally think she looks incredible, and very different to how Joker looks, which I think would have complemented the game well. A 3D model was also made of her, but of course neither of these things ever made it to the final game. Her name in the files is Akanj, if I'm pronouncing that right, which some people refer to as a name, however this is a translation that just means red hair. I really wish we had got this, but it's pretty clear Atlus believe dual protagonists just aren't worth it after the whole thing with Reload. This was only considered for a short amount of time, but Hashino states that they performed tests for an action battle system, but they never ended up going through with it, and instead they stuck with turn-based. The turn-based was given upgrades compared to the previous games, however, but looking back, it's very hard to imagine a game with such a fun combat system like Persona 5 being completely different, and I'm personally happy that this never got used. Many cutscenes are still watchable, although they're not included in the final game. Firstly, during the Shido arc, there's a scene of the Prime Minister becoming terrified of Shido and how he's growing. There's multiple cutscenes that weren't included in the final arc of the game. Firstly, there's a scene of the Phantom Thieves deciding not to change the heart of the public, and instead stay as the Phantom Thieves. This means they would have just changed criminals' hearts as they came up one at a time. A game over cutscene was also made if you missed the deadline of the final palace, something you actually can't do in the final game. This cutscene features 2 police officers coming into LeBlanc and telling Joker that he's been chosen by God and saying he'll be an inmate now, before Sojiro says he also wishes he could become an inmate. This is a very creepy scene, and I can kind of see why it wasn't in the game, even though it wouldn't make sense. There's an event where Sojiro gives Joker money, and he and the group go and hang out with Skytree. It's a small scene, but it's quite a nice one. There are also quite a few events that weren't included in the final game, which mainly feature Ryuji, Morgana, and Arn. There's also unused studying events with people such as Futaba. There's a scene made for the reveal of the ruler of the final palace, and a lot of voice dialogue of characters under the false reality. However, none of these are really included in the game, but they can be heard in this video here. There's also voice dialogue for most of the Third Awakenings, which can also be heard on the same channel. There's a scene for Kasumi feeling unwell after her persona awakened. Again, this is a small scene, but it would have been nice to include more group interactions with all of them together. There's an event where all the adults meet at a party and they all talk about Joker and how they know him. I mean, this is quite random, but it seems pretty fun. The scene after Ryuji sacrifices himself to save the Phantom Thieves, but is actually live, was planned to be much worse. They were going to insult him horribly, and there's even animations made for the characters punching and kicking him. Which, this is so stupid, as Ryuji is a character who has faced physical abuse. The scene in the game is bad enough already, but the fact they could have made it even worse just baffles me. There is an unused animated cutscene that was presumably meant to be triggered after Akechi turned himself into the police in Joker's place. Joker would then notice something strange, with everyone in Shibuya perfectly still, as if they'd been frozen in time. Just as he notices this, he hears the Jumbotron on the building behind him make sounds, followed by a voice which says, "I am responsible for crushing that dream." Joker then stares at the Jumbotron and sees nothing but static, and he can't make out who was talking before it turns back off. This was possibly meant to be triggered as acknowledgement that Joker was on a new reality and that the game isn't over. The cutscene itself isn't in the files, but it has data to be viewed in Thieves' Den. It's actually in a few trailers, and I've used the cutscene in previous videos, which possibly means it was cut very late into development. There was actually complete backstories for palace rulers, mainly Kamoshida, Madarame, and Okamura. These include fully fleshed out scenes and everything. Kamoshida's past includes a scene where he's actually a famous volleyball athlete when he was young, and he was interviewed on TV multiple times, and he donated lots of money to his former high school and won multiple Olympic medals. The second scene of his is when Kamoshida was involved in a sexual harassment scandal with the TV anchor. He begs the interviewer for forgiveness, and his company manager tells him that they will have solutions for this predicament. The third and final backstory scene for Kamoshida is him meeting with his company manager, and his company manager tells Kamoshida that in order to protect his sponsor's reputation, they will cover up all of his scandals no matter what, and tells him to go on and play an image. Motivated by how his acts will be covered up no matter what, this leads to him enrolling into Shujin's academy as a volleyball coach, so that he can do anything he wants, driven by a sheer sense of untouchability, which, this is quite dark, and honestly, it would have added a lot more to the palace. Madarame's cutscenes are very long, as it follows him as a teenager and when he's older. The main thing here that I'd focus on is the fact when Yusuke's mother has a seizure while painting in front of Madarame, and Madarame's thoughts were preoccupied with a man who wanted the painting in exchange for his debt, and worried Yusuke's mother's talents may surpass his, and with his thoughts completely preoccupied with the offer, he forgets to give Yusuke's mum the medicine in time, accidentally causing her to die. Following her death, the prospective buyer tells Madarame he's still interested in buying the painting, and he reacts to this news with a smile. Again, these cutscenes are quite dark, but they would have added a lot to the game, and I'm disappointed they weren't in the final product. Madarame does tell Yusuke that he let his mum die, however, the scene actually isn't played out visually. There's an entire shopping district which was cut out, which is also where Ryuji confronts Shido. There's footage of Joker walking around here, although the shops are invisible as it was never fully rendered. Nanako from Persona 4 actually has a model made for her in Persona 5, which she looks around a teenager here, maybe between the ages of 12 and 14, but they never ended up including her in the final game. Other Persona 4 characters who actually did make it to the game include Risei on a poster, and Naoto is mentioned on the TV. I personally think it would have been really cool to see them in the actual game. There's quite a few unused mechanics that didn't make it to the final game. For example, there's a mechanic which featured in Confidants. You had to answer questions correctly or the characters would lose their trust in you. This would cause doubt to pop up, and you would need to get the characters to trust you again. There's a scene on the phone where you can actually say that Joker has a boyfriend, and it causes the doubt mechanic to trigger. This was cut and never made it to the final game, and honestly, I'm seriously glad it didn't. This is such a stupid mechanic. Another mechanic that was cut is the disguise mechanic. You could change into other shadows and such things to get around palaces, but again, it's never made to the final game. This seems pretty fun though. There are actually voiced lines of a romance route for Sai. It's not fully known why this was cut from the game, however, there was a point in development where Joker was going to live in the same apartment complex as Makoto and Sai. There's a high chance that the romance route was cut once the living idea was removed, as she would feature much less in the game. She was also meant to have a White Day event, but of course this was cut in the romance route too. In an event made for Maruki's false reality, all the girls actually give you chocolate as a group, and they're all okay with dating Joker at the same time. This is a seriously creepy scene, as they're all of course in a false reality, which is another reason why you should never go with this ending. And there's also an additional scene that was made in the same sort of thing for White Day. This includes all the girls starting to compliment you, and then they ask you to steal their hearts. It's just kind of really cringy and weird, and it just didn't make it to the final game, of course. And I can understand why. This just feels a little like strange. So, Persona 5 went through many different builds, notably the 2015 build. Some of these things I've spoken about today did make it to the final game, just in a slightly different way. Some of Hifumi's elements as a Phantom Thief were given to Makoto, for example. Ultimately, you could make a 10-hour video about every single thing that's been cut, and there's pages and pages and pages of things you could read and hours of dialogue you could listen to. Of course, a lot of it is just random stuff that isn't interesting, which is why today I've just tried to cover the things that I think are the most interesting concepts that were removed from the game. I'll link some places you can read in the description about other COT content if you're still interested in finding out more. Persona 5 already feels like a massive game, and it's kind of crazy how much unused content didn't make it to the final product. This game could have easily been pushing 200 hours, but it's understandable why they tried to make it a bit shorter. Some of these things I'm glad were cut. For example, I can't imagine Persona without turn-based combat. If I could choose 3 things to keep, I firstly would keep the female protagonists. I'm really hoping we see this in a new game soon, and her design was super cool. Secondly, and I think this is kind of cheating, but I would love to see the backpacking idea in a new Atlas game. I love Persona 5 and I wouldn't want the story to change, but being able to explore multiple different cultures and locations would have been one of the coolest additions to any Persona game we've ever seen. Lastly, of course, I would choose the Sai romance route. I'm just kidding. I would choose Nanako to feature in the game. I would love to see returning characters actually have a bit of an impact on the game as a whole, but unfortunately, I just can't see Atlas ever doing this anytime soon. If you could choose something to keep, what would you choose? Let me know down below. If you've enjoyed this one, I've covered Persona's rise to popularity before, and I've got plenty more Persona videos on the way, so feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching.